Hello and welcome. My name's Angie Holden and I'm the blogger behind The Country Chic Cottage. Today I'm going to combine two different crafts together. So I wanted to combine using my Glowforge Aura with Sublimation. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could cut your own Sublimation blanks? So I experimented with several materials, both on and off camera, just for you. And spoiler alert, I got some things that work, and some of which might actually surprise you. So if you have the Glowforge Aura or you're considering getting it, check out this video on how to make your own sublimation blanks with a craft laser. Now, can this be applied to other lasers? Yes, absolutely. However, the settings would be different and the materials might cut differently on different machines. So first, let's take a look at the materials that I experimented with. I'm going to do a few different materials in this video to give you some options. Let's talk about first the Glowforge proof grade materials. So through doing this video, I realized that these materials have a poly coating already applied to them and will sublimate. I am going to test several different versions of this so we can see which ones work and which ones don't. We're going to test light basswood plywood, light maple plywood, and medium basswood hardwood. I chose these because they're a light color and it gives you a few different options. Now this does need to be the proof grade material from Glowforge if you're going to go this route. I don't know of any other materials that are made for lasers that have a poly coating. These are the ones that I'm testing. Then there's also a few products in the market that have a sublimation coating. The first is Craft Express Sublimation Plywood Placemats. So it's basically a large sheet of plywood that has a sublimation coating on it. Now these only have a sublimation coating on one side, so you might want to take that into account. These seem to be poly coated on both sides, and I'll do some experiments on that. Now these are thicker, but I did find a setting that would work with my Glowforge Aura. If you were going to cut these, we'll talk about adding a protective tape to them. So I have some transfer tape here. It's like a paper transfer tape, and I will link to it below. So if you're using the proof grade materials, it already has this material on the front and the back. If you're going to use something like this, you would need to apply this material, and we'll do that in just a minute. But first I want to talk about one more material. And these are sublimation hardboard sheets from PYD Life. And I have seen them advertise these as being able to cut on a Glowforge. And I tried several different things to get these to cut on my Glowforge Aura, none of which really worked. I never could dial in the settings. And the other thing about these is any type of hardboard or medium density board like MDF, they will fill up your filters very, very quickly. So using these in the Glowforge Aura can be very expensive, and you might have to change your filters regularly. So I actually gave up on these and I'm not going to use them. However, they are white on one side. And here's one of those, so you can see that it is white on one side, and this is one I was experimenting with. And then it's wood on the other side, and you can see I was making some test cuts on this one, and they're actually not all the way through. So I found with this that I did need to turn the wood side up, that the Aura itself could not cut on this white side. So I did find that, but like I said, I never could get a consistent cut no matter what settings I tried, and I was filling up my filters very, very quickly, so I decided to give up on this one. So if you purchase these, know that you'll be filling up your filters and you might get very expensive cutting these on the Aura. If you're going to use these sublimation plywood placemats, there is a very smooth side and a side that has a little bit of a texture. The very smooth side is the sublimation side of these. I didn't have any luck sublimating on the rougher side, and this side that is very smooth is more shiny as well. I actually preferred adding the masking to both sides of these just to protect the material itself. So you add the masking to protect the material from basically the burnt edges. So here's this material cut, and you can see there's a burnt edge. But I have this masking on, and when I remove that masking, that burnt edge will go away. So it's just a way to easily clean up whatever you cut with your Glowforge Aura. So to apply the masking, I just start unrolling it. and then start it on one side. Now this is a 12-inch roll. If you have a smaller roll, you need to do this in strips. I like the wider roll, and I just start it on one side, start pressing it down just with a scraper, and then apply it across the entire surface. Then use a pair of scissors to trim away the excess. So I just kind of like to roughly trim the first time here, then get it down really well, and use scissors. You could also use an X-Acto knife and like a cutting mat to do this, but I tend to keep it simple and just sort of trim around the edges with scissors. Now I do add the mask to both sides, so I will repeat on the back side as well. For this material, you will need to keep up with which side is the front and the back, because only the front is able to be sublimated. Click Create a New Design, create a blank design. Then I'm going to import artwork. Find the design on your computer. The best cut files are SVG files. The best files for this type of project contain an SVG as well as a PNG that you can sublimate. Once your design is within the Glowforge program, you want to resize it. You do want to know exactly what you resize this to. So I'm going to pull up the ruler here at the bottom, go to scale. For mine, I'm going to make it 3 inches wide, I think. You can make these however wide you would like. Now we can copy and paste as many copies as we would like. So now I have 6 pumpkin pieces that are all 3 inches wide exactly. Whatever material you're going to use to cut these out of, you would add that to your Glowforge at this time. Here I'm using the proof grade light maple plywood, and I can move these around anywhere I would like on the sheet of plywood. I also cut some of the Craft Express Sublimation plywood placemats, and I did those on the thick basswood plywood setting. When you use proof grade materials, you don't have to worry about the settings. You just need to make sure that it does say it's a cut line. So you want cut lines, and the Glowforge will do the rest. Now that you have your design ready, all that's left to do is to hit print in the Glowforge program. The program will then send the file to your Glowforge and it will start cutting. Then you just let your Glowforge do the work. As you saw on the screen, this does take several minutes to cut, but well worth it to cut your own laser sublimation blanks. Just watch your Glowforge the entire time and keep an eye on it. Once it's done, the program will prompt you and tell you that your print is done and it's time to open the lid. Then just open the lid and remove your laser cut pieces. Now let's take a look at the cuts we were able to get with the Glowforge Aura. Here are each of the materials that I cut on the Glowforge. This is the medium basswood hardwood. This one is the light maple plywood. This one is the light basswood plywood. And this is the Sublimation plywood placemat from Craft Express. Now for each of these, now that it's done cutting, you'll want to remove the tiny holes. And sometimes I find it helpful to have like a little pick, like a weeding hook, to sort of push those through. Then you want to remove your masking from each piece. Something like Gorilla Tape will help you get it started if you're having issues. And I'm going to remove the masking from the front as well as the back of all of my pieces, and then we can print our sublimation print and sublimate these. Now it's time to make our sublimation design. I'm going to do this in Canva just for example. You can use whatever program you would like. Click Create a Design, Custom Size, and then I'm going to do an 8.5 by 11 inch design. This is the size of the sublimation paper I'm using. You can choose any size here. Then you want to click Upload, Upload Files, and upload the file that we are going to be using. Then click that file to add it to your canvas. Now we want to resize it to a little bit larger than we cut our pumpkins with the Glowforge. So we're going to click Position, we're going to lock our ratio, and then we're going to do 3.05. Remember that the pumpkins that we cut with the Glowforge were 3 inches wide. I'm making these slightly wider so we don't have to line it up as exact. And now I'm going to duplicate this. And I'm going to make 6 copies. Now I'm going to be printing with my Sawgrass, and it tends to want to move things around on the paper a little bit to account for margins. So I generally move everything to the upper left-hand corner. Now we're going to click Share, Download. I suggest downloading as a PNG file. I usually do it at 1.5 the size. And then Download. Since I'll be printing on my Sawgrass printer, I'm using PrintMate. I'm going to click Add Files and find that file on my computer. Once that's open, I like to change this to 11 and the spacing to 0. And that should fit it on the paper exactly and be the exact size that we sized it in Canva. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to pick a hardboard sign plaque preset. I'm just going to make sure everything looks okay. Mirror is checked, high quality is on, and everything looks correct. I am going to go to color management and change this to vibrant. Then I'm going to click print. This will print the design to my Sawgrass printer. So now let's take a look at sublimating what we cut on the Glowforge Aura. So here's my sublimation print. It's sublimation paper printed on a sublimation printer with sublimation ink. And then I have my little pumpkins that I cut with my Glowforge. This is the light maple plywood version. I'm keeping them separate so we can contrast and compare and see which ones work and see which ones do not. Now I printed these slightly larger, and if any of these had any severe brown on them as I was going through them, I wiped that with a damp cloth. So they're fairly clean, but I'm gonna go ahead and lint roll each one. And then we'll put them down onto the paper. Now, I made these slightly large on purpose so that we could leave a border all the way around. So once I have this in place on the paper, I can just use some tape, heat resistant tape, to secure it into place. And I'm going to repeat, all 6 of these are cut out of the same material, so I'm just going to add them all to the sheet. I set my heat press to 385 degrees for 50 seconds, and I used that for all of my samples. I put protected paper on the top and the bottom and pressed these with the sublimation print side up. I repeated for all of the sample pieces that I cut on my Glowforge. Then once the press pops up, you just remove that sublimation print and check out your gorgeous sublimated wood project. So now let's take a look at the results and compare and contrast each of the materials that I used. Here are my sample pieces finished, removed the sublimation print. Now, if you want to test these, you can take like a damp cloth and see if the sublimation will rub off. It is just a wood banner that I'll be using indoors, so probably doesn't matter anyway. The look is what I'm after. So this version is our kind of our control sample because it is the sublimation plywood. Then as we move up, we have the light maple plywood, light basswood plywood, and medium basswood hardwood. I felt like the light maple plywood did best. Now I did want to talk about a little bit about it being two-sided. I mentioned this sublimation plywood is not. This is a different print, but one I was experimenting with. Super bright on the front. I tried sublimating the back, and it is just very light and rubs off with a wet cloth. However, with the light maple plywood, the proof grade material from Glowforge, I just did a little experiment. I did not print this out exactly, but I did experiment with sublimating the back, and the back looks really great as well. So now let's take a look at each of these a little bit closer and compare and contrast. Here's the sublimation plywood, and it looks very bright, very vibrant. Now remember, all the materials I'm showing do have a wood grain, so that will kind of show through my image because it was a light image. So it will change the color of any image that you use. For comparison, here is that sublimation plywood, that same piece on the left, against the light maple plywood proof grade material on the right. As you can see, the proof grade material looks really great. Plus it's easy to cut, so it really makes it my favorite. Now, I said the light maple plywood did best. Let's look and see what I'm talking about. This time on the left, I have that light maple plywood, and on the right, I have the light basswood plywood. It just did not sublimate as great. The colors are not as vibrant. I might be able to play with my time and temperature, but I probably would stick with the light maple plywood to get those bright, vibrant colors. Then finally, this version, the light maple plywood again is on the left, and I put the medium basswood hardwood on the right. Again, the colors just aren't as bright and vibrant with anything except for that light maple plywood. So if you're gonna go with the Glowforge proof grade material, I recommend using the light maple plywood or any of the maple plywood thicknesses. So I'm gonna use all the ones I did out of the light maple plywood to string the banner. So these are just the samples from that set. So I'm just using a piece of twine going in one side and out the other. And then repeating that same process for each pumpkin. So in one side, out the other. And you can wrap your end in tape. A lot of times that helps with the fraying on this twine like this. Or you can just keep rolling it between your fingers in between each one. So I'm going to continue stringing these into a cute fall banner with little pink pumpkins sublimated onto wood. And now I have a cute pumpkin fall banner in which I lasered the pumpkins and then sublimated them on top. Now I made the banner itself just out of the ones I cut out of the light maple plywood, just because I had 6 of those and enough to string into a banner. The rest of them I cut fewer out of each piece, just so I didn't have tons of pumpkins. I did not need that long of a banner. So hopefully this helps you decide which material is best for making your own sublimation blanks. So what would I recommend? So first of all, we talked about the light maple plywood. I would definitely recommend it if you want to use proof grade materials. I do find proof grade materials way easier to cut with my Glowforge Aura. So that would be probably my first choice. Now, if you want something that is actually says sublimation on it, the sublimation plywood placemats from Craft Express would be my choice. And we talked a little bit about the PYD Life, the hardboard, and it filling up the filters of the Glowforge. So I would just watch anything that you get that says, like, you know, a sublimation sheet that you can laser. If it is MDF or hardboard material, you might want to reconsider because it may fill up your filters, and I personally found it difficult to cut with the Glowforge Aura. If you have a different Glowforge, different laser, might be different circumstances, but that was my experience. So for me, I would probably choose either the sublimation plywood placemats or just use the proof grade material itself. Again, my favorite was the light maple plywood. Probably any maple plywood would work. Now, I was pleasantly surprised that the proof grade materials worked, and they work because they already have a finish over them. So they already have a finish that has been applied to the surface. I actually did not know that it had any polyester in it until I was just experimenting. I was actually trying to get a sample that would fail for the video that I had intended to make for this, and I was making a failure sample, and when it didn't fail, I was like, I need to go back to the drawing board and redecide, because I would rather use the proof grade materials overall in my Glowforge for ease of cutting. Now, I will say that the sublimation plywood placemats are thicker than the plywood that I use, the light version of the plywood. So they would come in handy for, you know, a project where you needed a thicker sublimation blank. If you needed something thinner, I did not see this material from Craft Express in any other format or any other size. So they are a 8 by 11 inch size, basically. So I would say that if you needed a larger size or a thinner material, the only option that I found that worked was the proof grade materials themselves. So hopefully that helps you. If you have any questions about making your own sublimation blanks with a laser, drop down in the comment section, ask away. If you like this video and it helped you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, head on over to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. We have videos just like this one every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss any of those. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.